Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Kate. What day is it? Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. We're in our last week of class and on to our last new content for the winter term. I wanted to say a couple words about the discussion board, which was really strong, and y'all thought in really good, nuanced ways, I think, in that discussion board. So a couple things about that, and then introduce this last bit of content. So the discussion board, really good thinking there. You all understood well Candace Swami's critique of same-sex marriage as a fight, the way that the state has used marriage as a cudgel against women of color. And then the majority of you, it seemed to sort of fall down on the side of marriage might be problematic as an institution, but if we're talking about basic equity and basic equality, everyone should have access to marriage rights. Another issue that came up in the discussion board is the question of why marriage, or why the state has so much to say about about sexuality, sex lives, and then also why should resources be distributed because of marriage instead of some other way. And that's a really good question, and one that I don't think that we have an answer to, but it's worth thinking about. What are other ways that we could distribute things like citizenship rights, inheritance rights, the adoption rights, and things like that, healthcare rights. So as I said in the last video, if we think about marriage as a basket of resources that someone then shares with another person, can we imagine a world where that basket could be shared with, say, multiple people, or people who you don't necessarily have a sexual relationship with? What are some of the different ways that we might organize life? What marriage does suggest to us is that the state has a real investment in a particular kind of family form, and it's that reproductive family form. And if we go back to the beginning of the winter term and think about John D'Amelio's arguments, I think that's interesting. The way that capitalism doesn't need reproductive nuclear families, but it does. It needs them to reproduce workers, and so you see an ideological investment in the family as the material need for it declines, and that ideological work to make that reproductive family form the most important thing is definitely live and at work in marriage law. All right, so let's talk about your last new content. So I've asked you to read a report by a think tank about issues facing LGBT people of color and incarceration. And then also a short piece that's a conversation amongst a number of activists and scholars talking about what kind of world we might actually want to build. So, and when you're reading through these, and there are a lot of pictures and diagrams, so don't get intimidated by the page length, I want you to stay open to some of their arguments about how people end up in the criminal justice system. The report starts by talking about why LGBT people of color are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, and it can be easy to think, because of the way ideology works, that the laws are the law, and if you end up in incarcerated or in the hands of the police, you obviously did something wrong. So this is sort of our common sense idea of how policing and incarceration work. The authors that you're reading this week are going to make a different kind of argument. They're going to say that there's ideological work that gets some people sort of the eyes of the state focused on them in a way that they aren't on someone else. So an easy example of this is drug use. Drug use, it turns out, is pretty consistent across race and class lines, gender lines as well. There's a decent portion of the population that uses drugs that are deemed illegal across all of these differences. But if you look at who ends up incarcerated for these choices, it's usually people of color and poor people, rather than, say, college students who get high in their dorm, right? You might get in trouble with the dorm, but you're likely not going to have the police called on you. So this is about how policing works differently. against different populations. And if you follow the news, these arguments won't be incredibly new. They'll also talk in this piece about what happens in courtrooms and in treatment centers and in processes of reentry that discriminate against LGBT people of color more than other people. And then I'll look at what impact, long-term impact, that kind of hyper-incarceration has as people live with the long-term consequences of having a criminal record. So the one of the questions on the discussion, or the question on the discussion board, asks you to define like two different problems, but then also come up with sort of one idea for a solution or something that works to change the situation that you're reading about. There are a lot of recommendations that they offer in the report I ask you to read. So take some time there and focus and see if anything resonates for you. Your final assessment, your final unit assessment, I'm going to look at it, so I'm going to look away for a second, asks you to answer two of the 4 prompts and to use at least one discussion board post in your answer. And this was a requirement on the previous exam as well. But just to clarify, I just want to see you quote something from the discussion board that is in line with, just as if it's another text that you're using. Let's see, is there anything else to tell you about that? And also you are absolutely welcome to reuse your own words from the discussion board. The point of the course was to sort of give the discussion board as a chance to try out some ideas, and then the unit assessments a chance to flesh those out a bit. So if you have any questions or concerns as you're working through these last couple of days of material, give me a shout. No late exams on this last one are accepted because I need to turn in grades right away. So that's due on the 24th. All right, I look forward to reading your work this week and talk to you soon. Bye.